Secondary articulatory gestures. You may remember terms like co-articulation or overlapping or secondary articulation, right? And we discussed that co-articulation is something like when two processes are simultaneously taking place and they are equal, right, for co-articulation. And within connected speech, when there is some sort of, assimilation, they may be, termed as the overlapping, when sounds are overlapping into each other. In this session, we are particularly focusing on summarizing the secondary articulatory gestures, which are very, very important. And we would be focusing mainly on four types of important secondary articulatory gestures, right, which are common, which must be described by the experts of phonetics and phonology, and which are important to be, applied by the experts who analyze speech, right? So we would be talking about palatalization, velarization, pharyngalization, and labialization. These four are basically very important, types of secondary articulatory gestures, right? So, like we talked about on our discussion on vowels and vowel-like articulatory gestures, that the vowels are, like the addition of vowels, like when there is something added to the vowels, like we talked about R coloring of vowel, right? Or the advanced tongue root for the description of vowel. So that's basically the, the added superimposed feature which is done to the primary articulation, right? So the secondary articulatory gestures, basically they are the gestures, they are the variations which are based on the lesser degree of the closure, which is occurring simultaneously when the primary articulatory gesture is being produced, right? So secondary articulatory gesture is always based on the lesser amount of articulation, right? That's less than 50% of the articulation is done, and it is taking place at somewhere else other than the primary place of articulation, right? If that's the articulation which is related to the place of articulation, then the primary articulation is from where the sound is actually produced. But the secondary articulation is when there is something addition to the primary articulation is taking place somewhere else in the oral cavity or nasal cavity, right? So the secondary articulatory gesture is the superimposition of a glide-like articulation, right, on top of the primary articulation. That's something which is added, right, and that's taking place in the vocal cavity, right? For palatalization, when the the back part of the tongue is taken up, right, and the palatalized addition of the superimposition is done to any sound, that's called palatalization. And then velarization, when velar is involved, right, in order to make something different in contrast with the already existing feature, right? And the velarization, a very good example is from Arabic language, right? When there are sounds in which the emphatic process is added in addition to the primary gesture. So that's velarization. We would explain this later. And then pharyngalization. Pharyngalization is when there is some sort of activity along with the primary articulatory gesture is taking place at the pharyngalization. Maybe that's the narrowing of the pharyngalized process, the pharyngeal cavity, that's narrowed, or it may be that expanded, right? So that's pharyngalization, okay? And then labialization, which is of course one of the very common secondary articulatory gesture, right? Like in Arabic sounds, tuo, swo, twa, tuo. So that's basically th, but the wo is added. Tuo and swo, swad, swo. So these are typical examples from Arabic language for labialization. So these four are the most important secondary articulatory gestures, and we would discuss them in some of the sessions to come.